Welcome aboard the dopamine train, where our ADHD-powered locomotive stops at every shiny thought along the tracks. I'm Obee Won, and with my co-host Rome, we explore various topics and see where the conversation train takes us. Welcome back to the dopamine train. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi with my good friend Rome,
Yo.
where we're going to talk about various subjects today, from distractive driving, AI, punching up and punching down, possibly. We'll see what we can get into today. Rome, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about Google's new AI. If you want to share with our audience what that is.
Sure. And just a quick aside, I think of the topics you just mentioned right now, the one I'm most interested in is probably the distracted driving, because it's the only one we didn't talk about before the show. So excited to hear about that. But as far as Google's LKM, I'll confess, I don't know that much about it other than it has generated some content that has finally reached that threshold where I can't quite tell that it's not real. I mean, there are some giveaways at this point that will still indicate, if you spend enough time listening, you'll start to realize that the speakers and their relationship to what they're saying feels a little out of sync, but the emotion is there, the cadence, the stuttering, the natural human, I guess you could say, idiosyncrasies are present. So just off of first glance, or if you're listening to a short clip, you wouldn't know any better listening to it. So it's something that's just a reality we're going to have to contend with. And I know you've expressed your thoughts a little bit on AI, Obi-Wan, but I want to ask you again, if I haven't already, what your experience with AI is, either in its use cases, if you've used it, or if you've encountered it in some way through work or anything of that sort.
AI is very interesting to me because it reminds me of the calculator. So back in 8th grade in Mr. Gagan's class, he had this saying of garbage in, garbage out. And when it comes to AI, it's very much whatever you're putting in is what you're going to get out of it. And so I've used AI for cover letters, to be honest, in job searching, because in the end, they're using AI for sifting through your resume, unless it's like a mom and pop shop, or depending on the industry. But a lot of the time it's a software that you have to input the same job 5 times, even though it's included in your resume. They're sifting through that. And that's what I've used AI for, is just kind of like a formula in a sense, where job description, I put the whole job description into I'm trying to remember what the most famous one, ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Put it into ChatGPT, job description.
GPT.
And then GPT. Goodness.
Okay.
GPT. Let's see if we can enunciate those words today. So we put it into AI, the job description. Then I ask the AI can you write a cover letter based off this job description and this resume? And it just goes, done. And then I obviously put my own language in. I have experimented with the fact of putting even my own writing style. So I took like an old college paper that was like 10 pages or plus, and I threw that in there, and I said, also, write it to this style. And it actually did it, and I felt it was very useful. I could see how the argument is like, you're not doing it yourself, but it's like, I view it very much as a tool to get the thing done faster. But there's always costs of that sense of like, I'm not using my brain in a sense, or using that brain capacity to do the thing. But at the same time, my brain capacity can then be used for something else, like say this podcast. So that's my experience with the AI. What I've read up on Google's version is basically it's a way for them to use different voicing, if I'm correct. Is that
Well,
what it is?
there's many different use cases for it, to my understanding, but the one that stood out most prominently is the podcast. So there's a couple Spotify sound bites where the podcasters themselves discuss finding out that they aren't real. So it's a guy and a gal that are our respective hosts, and there's little bits and pieces where they discuss the news. In fact, I think the first blurb I heard was regarding the Middle East, and then the second one was about their discovery of their own lack of humanity. And it sounds pretty spot on. One of the things that kind of gives it away is there is like no interruption. Like they'll respond really quickly, like back and forth, in the same way that real people will, but there is no overlap. Like they're just ready to answer the other person's response, almost like the words are coming from the same brain, but two different people, which is kind of weird. And
kind of like inner thoughts. In a
yeah,
sense,
it would be like if you validated everything I said right now because you already knew what I was thinking and going to say.
So the lack of pause shows that they're not human.
Yeah, even though there are moments of artificial, I guess you could call it artificial flaw that's introduced where they'll talk like this, or they'll say words and they'll add emphasis to certain parts of words. The smoothness is still kind of apparent, and the relationship again to the topic. So they might be discussing something that is really heavy, but they're speaking with their normal enthusiastic.
Their normal tone. Interesting.
Which doesn't.
I wonder if it would change over time. The prediction hypothesis here is that it's going to happen.
I mean, it could.
It's just a matter of when.
If in the last 2 years we've gone from basically no AI to almost indistinguishable AI. I mean, just look at what Google has accomplished with their, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but their short video generation clips. Those look like real clips. Obviously, you can't make a whole movie out of that. And maybe you can fabricate some short clips using that, but yeah, it's only going to get better and better in a short amount of time. So, and I personally, to mirror your talk a little while ago about your experience using it, I was using it quite frequently. I would say starting maybe 2 years ago, I got Midjourney through Discord, and I was just blown away by the fact that I could just type in an idea of what I wanted to see and it would create an image of it. Like, that's just insane. And I used that for a while. I used it for either generating little assets, so things for my stream. I would use it for thumbnails, either in a pinch or if I wanted to get a specific look for something. And it was incredibly useful. Granted, it's kind of limited in the things you could really tell it. Like, there were certain words or ideas that it just would never understand. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones those were, but they were. There were some limiting factors involved in using the application. But my only experiences with Midjourney and ChatGPT at this point, there are so many different tools now that Google has implemented with their, the whole theme of this year's flagship smartphones was the implementation of AI. Right. So you have iPhone's Siri AI and Google Gemini, which I don't have because I don't have stock Google OS, but I imagine that both of them are basically on par. They're the gold standard of AI. Right. And as someone who used Siri pretty regularly before, just as the regular assistant to do simple things. I don't know how much I would use those extra AI features per se, but those may just become what's the word I'm thinking of? Not household. They'll just become taken for granted, I guess you could say, because people will use them so frequently, and then AI will just become a requirement that every device has to have. But that's just me starting to speculate now.
Which is fair. I think what's interesting is the direction of where it's going, and it's this continual trust in technology that it's always good that I find very fascinating. And we were taught as children of this is that, oh, newer's better. Just like a given, like
Right.
a newer car, a newer house, newer is better. And I'm very like skeptical of like where this is going to end up. Is this going to be a oops moment in the future of like, whoops, we messed up here and now we're having Terminator? Or is it going to be a change in like culture and what is treated as valuable in a sense of like, and that's like the big part with like the arts, right? Is this going to impact the arts and how not necessarily business is done, but what is art, and bringing that into question? Who is an artist? And that's where I find fascinating what I don't have the answers, obviously, for which direction is going to happen if we're going to end up with Terminator, who's painting art on the side or doing sculpture. But we're at a crossroad of events, which is going to determine how society's going to be run in a sense. Because like AI, they've made arguments that's going to replace workforce. So what are you going to do with all people not working? Like those kinds of things that a single 2-letter word is impacting, or two words, artificial intelligence. And so it's a big topic. I'm always curious of the lasting cannot talk today. Implications
Oh, good. Yeah.
of, because I think about like we just now felt the effects of the car, right? We've had the car out for at least 100 years. It has shrunk the world in doing so and made it a normal to be, I'm going to drive 30 minutes and go 5-ish miles. And that's like cool. But then you have like some parts of the world where like 5 miles, that's like 2 hours of your time. And so in a sense, all this technology has been, what it's been doing is saving us time to do time for other things. But I don't know. It brings up the question of like, what's too much leisure time in a sense? Because throughout human history, it's always been like work to live or survive. And now we're in this point of society where leisure time is starting to become more prominent than working time, at least in some places, from like 4-day work weeks to things of that sort. So I don't know if you have any thoughts. I started rambling a little bit of like society and things of that sort.
I mean, there's a ton to unpack there in what you just mentioned. I think AI is going to have an impact on everything from, I'm trying to remember the very first point, from culture and how we view it to the consequences of using it. I would say based on our current track record, it's going to come down to something bad happening that is catastrophic or nearly catastrophic for anyone to go, oh, maybe this isn't a good idea. Because it's typically how we operate as a society is, you could indicate the signs of something being troublesome, but if it's in its current state, bringing in profit or it's really useful from the outset, then those long-term effects are usually pushed to the wayside in favor of what's happening right now.
Right.
So as far as the Terminator scenario, I don't know how accurate those movies are as far as predicting what is going to happen. We've heard this a lot, the sort of fear mongering that we're going to get taken over by AI robots. But again, that was a trend of people's imaginations from the past, gosh, I don't know, 30, 40 years at this point.
I think it's actually like 50.
50?
Because like, did
so
Terminator come out in the 70s?
I would imagine
Let's take a
70s or
let's
80s.
take a quick gander. Go on with your tale.
But all of those ideas, as far as I'm aware, are based in fiction, unless there was some early AI research at the time that led people to believe that this is a potential outcome. I don't know if the whole taking over the world is a real outcome to worry about. And that's not because I'm necessarily in favor of AI or anything like that. It's the same sort of argument as you need to stay out of the water because Jaws is in there. It's like, well, sharks aren't really like that. They don't attack people in mass, or it creates sort of a misnomer about how things work. Horror movies can be good at that.
Interesting.
So, and the other thing to keep in mind too is that while AI is incredibly advanced in its current state, I don't know if it operates in the same manner that the fictional versions of AI do, where they're actually thinking and they're making self-conscious or self-aware decisions. I don't know if we're even at that point technologically to be able to create that. And that actually just reminds me of another thing that you mentioned a little while ago, which is everything newer is better.
Right.
And I think one thing that a lot of people forget is that history is not a linear experience. It's not something that is just going to happen as it was meant to, or I should specify, technological progression is not something that just moves in one direction, right, and we only can go in one path. Like, for example, we could have spent the last 60 years becoming incredibly well-developed using, we'll say there were no cars in the picture. Like, we could technically still be I'll say the last 150, 200 years, we could still be in buggy whips and have put all of our effort and resources into having advanced supercomputers, and things would just be a different dynamic. Or maybe we'd have another form of air transportation, right, that isn't so fuel costly as airplanes. Or maybe we have a different type of airplane that, maybe doesn't use an engine at all. I mean, now I'm kind of stepping into the realm of science fiction, but what I'm trying to say is that people and their creative inventions aren't based on a singular track of, oh, this is the answer to the next thing. It varies based on who comes up with the idea at the time, and if that idea gets greenlit, if it's accepted, because you've heard discussions or conspiracies about there being a hydrogen powered vehicle or a water powered vehicle, and those are always shut down because of the implication they have for the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, I think so. But now I know for a fact that GM, General Motors, and Honda are on a joint venture to create a hydrogen engine for the future of cars. And I think that comes back to regulations, because I know the big thing in the UK is that I know it's coming up soon. I don't know if it's like 2024, 2025, that no new vehicles in the United Kingdom can be gasoline powered. So there's a lot of push for like the electric vehicles, but I like electric vehicles, but it's one of those things where, unless you mentioned earlier, like, disaster happens where we're reactive instead of proactive. Electric vehicles take a lot of different components. I think one of the components for batteries is cobalt, if I'm correct. I could be wrong in saying that as well, but I know it's like, where are you getting those items from, and what kind of implications are those people like? Mining in a lot of the like world is not what it is, like what you think it is. It's still people going into a shaft as like a child and still mining that out by hand a lot of the time versus using bigger equipment. And a lot of the time that's like at a cost to that person's life. So even like our phones have a little bit of blood on their hands a little bit.
I think just about everything that we create or import probably has some shady origins to it.
100%. So to bring it back to so there's been a push for the hydrogen one because of those things, and because it's same kind of engine as an internal combustion engine versus like having a battery and then kind of a electric motor in a sense. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that hydrogen as of where we're at in society would be better overall, but then you're running into the problem that water could become more of a commodity item rather than a need item, which is like water you need to live. So
well, does it destroy the water? Is that possible?
It doesn't destroy the water, but it in a sense makes how it works is like a steam engine. Kind of like an old locomotive for a train, from my understanding. So it literally just, the exhaust is oxygen because it's breaking down the water. It's like in the form of steam.
Yeah.
I wanted to confirm that though. Hydrogen engine. But kind of like going to our other stuff, I know we've talked those different things out a bit. And I know you wanted to hear about the distracting driver.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask you about that.
So, distracting driving. It's been an interesting week for Obee Won Kenobi. So, some of my hobbies are trading cards. Love that expensive, shiny cardboard. And so I was doing expensive, shiny cardboard things. I had left and went to hang out with my friend in the parking lot. We're shooting the shit back and forth. And then he's like, I'm getting hungry. Let's go to this place called DP Dough. DP Dough is a franchise. Don't know if we have it where you're at, but I didn't know.
I don't think so.
Didn't know it was a franchise until I actually walked in, because I thought it was like a local thing. But they specialize in calzones and not.
Ooh, those are good.
Not fried, like boneless wings, because they throw it in the oven. Anyway, so we go there. We're shooting the shit outside. It's dark. It's starting to finally feel like fall a little bit. And then this blue, probably 2004, 2005 Chevy Impala pulls up right near the strip, in a sense. And we're in the parking lot, and I'm like, I had to do a double take of, why is there like a Roku background going on in this car right now? I don't understand this.
What?
Like, and I'm I'm like, I said to my friend, I was like, do you see this right now? He's like, yeah, he has like some sort of monitor. I'm like, dude, I think that's a full-on 24-inch Roku TV in the passenger seat, like set up on the dash,
aimed at the driver's seat,
like next to the driver's seat, like on the right side. And I'm just like, what is going on? And then I notice, and then he turns it on, so I confirm it's a television, and then he puts on X-Men, and I'm like, do I see Dr. X in the back? And like, I'm just like, in what world do you first off have not been pulled over yet? Because it's, again, a whole ass 24-inch TV in the passenger seat.
And just to confirm, this is not something that came with the vehicle. This is a modification that he added himself. Modification he added himself. And I was just like, is driving not that stimulating enough for people anymore? Because I'm like,
death's on the line all the time. Is death not even a motivator anymore?
I don't. There is this weird sort of cognitive dissonance, I think, where people don't associate the things that happen every single day with their own waking reality. Like, oh yeah, I heard in the news that there was a bunch of car accidents and this, this person died and it's horrible. Anyways, I'll see you later. I'm gonna go for a drive.
Right?
Like those two things are not the same.
But they are the same.
Like, one is not related to the other. Yeah, I don't know what that comes from, if it's the way it's conveyed. I found that in my life, the only way I could get shaken out of it, unfortunately, is when bad things have happened. Like when I witness a car accident in real time. Then you go, oh, wait, this could happen to me right now, any day. It just doesn't quite register. I imagine it's probably the same with crime or something like that. I mean, I know we were going to kind of shy away from the topic, and I won't ramble on too long about this, but you hear in the news all the time about shootings that take place, especially in my area, in California, LA area. You hear about crime happening all the time, and when you see an article about some place that you actually work at or that you spent 4 years going to school at, and you see the typical image of the police cars and the yellow tape, except it's set to a familiar backdrop, like your school, then it hits a little bit closer to home. You start to connect the dots a little bit. But anyways, that you were saying about the 24-inch passenger TV.
Passenger TV. For him to view at his leisure while driving. And I found it fascinating. I didn't go up to the guy or anything like that. I took a picture to confirm and show, and as like a good story and such. But I just found it It's interesting to me how we're in such a need for stimulation, and I'm the foster child for that. We got ADHD, but where's the limit? Where's like not necessarily the discipline, but where's the line? I have also seen, excuse me, what was it? I've also seen like full on people watching Netflix on their phone while driving. I'm like, because like I get watching TV while you're at home doing other stuff. You need the background noise, sure. But if you need that show on per se as background noise, just have as audio. But I don't know. It's wild to me. That's not like the first thing I've seen in a sense. That was just a wild time to me. Like you actually took the time to buy like a $200 or less TV from Walmart, set it up on like
and set it up
in I'm curious how he's getting the Wi-Fi too. We're not even talking about that because it's again a 2004 Chevy Impala navy blue.
He might have a SIM card or something, or he might have it connected to his phone as
probably.
Well, it depends what the setup is. Like, is it just a monitor, or is there like a little Raspberry Pi situation going on, or it's got to be connected somehow?
I don't know if there's some
or maybe it's being airplayed. Who knows?
I would say probably airplayed. It would be my best because I'm like it was a smart. So Roku's are smart TVs, so. I didn't see him how he turned on the X-Men movie, but I just saw that bald head, and then I forget the actor's name for the life of me. Also in Star Trek Next Generation.
Oh, Sir Patrick Stewart.
Sir Patrick Stewart. I saw that glorious bald head, and like, it was like that is the man, the legend. So, but that was. Go ahead.
Have you ever seen people wearing headphones while they're driving? Do you know what the rule is on that?
Headphones, from my understanding, is it cannot cover both ears. You can only have one in at a time.
Oh, these were like the full on.
Oh, like they got the
these
beats.
were like the cat ear over the basically, yeah, and it was on both ears, and I understand watching a TV is distracting, but to me, something about having your sound completely obstructed is just. I don't know. I'd be scared driving around like that.
It's like you need both senses, but then I'm like, I'm thinking outliers, right? Would be deaf people, right? Would be fine without sound, and they drive perfectly fine. But I think there's an extra element of one that's like your existence versus like this is a not a normal for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because because you're basically asking the question, what is most important? Not to be distracted by sound or distracted by sight.
Well, I would argue sight is more important because you can't drive if you're blind.
Exactly. So so the sight part is the problem. That's funny. Whole head were they like, have you witnessed this personally? Like were they full like AirPod Maxes or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, it was over ear headphone style. This was 2 days ago. I was driving home and the car in front of me stopped at a light. He had his full on. It's like a gaming headset.
Oh my god. Did he have like a gaming setup on the passenger side like our TV guy?
Might as well. Hey, he wasn't even in an old car either. Like I feel like any car made in the last 10 years has Bluetooth support.
It does.
You just wirelessly hook that sucker up and you don't have to worry about it unless he's concerned about the sound quality of his music. That's the only thing I can think of.
I need it right up against my eardrum to get it feel
Yeah.
the vibration.
Need that 7.1 spatial audio Dolby Atmos surround sound
With the TH sound going.
while I'm driving. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how people value safety differently, or I'm trying to think of an example of just a moment where you see someone start to do something that's very nonchalant, and you personally, within your experience, go, I wouldn't do that if I were you. You know, just super casually. I mean, there's all kinds of examples of this on the internet, unfortunately. Like if you search far enough, you'll find all kinds of either work-related accidents or things that happen out on the street. And they're brutal because most of the time when something goes wrong, the person or the victim never sees it coming.
100%.
You know, and maybe they were doing something dumb to start with, but the amount of time to course correct is just, you know, that window has long passed. They're not getting out of this situation, which is, it's terrifying. I think stuff like that definitely helps keep me grounded in reality. And just the understanding that, you know, for all of the encouragement and, you know, I think in society, we talk a lot about how human life is special. It's also very, very fragile. And when you see its fragility play out in real time, it makes you humble a little bit. Like, maybe I should be about 5% more careful when I go outside today. Like, actually look both ways. Because it's not always your lack of judgment that will cost you. It is others' judgment, and so you have to be able to play defense at all times, basically, like course correct.
Interesting. Immediately what came to mind when you're like dangerous situations is like, says the guy who did parkour for how many years?
About 5. Yeah, that was I would say that I'm thinking in my head right now if it's something that I would still go out and train, and it depends. So I think if someone, well, actually this has happened. Someone expressed interest in getting into stunts, one of my former students, and I said, okay, let's go to the park and train. And I mean, granted, everything we worked on was incredibly basic and easy to do, but thinking of when I used to actually go out and train, or if I go to specifically the most dangerous time in my life was probably 2016, where I was very adamant about climbing structures and climbing buildings, not even necessarily training or getting better at flips or developing technique, but just the rush or the idea of being up really high and like hanging on to life by a thread. I never actually got into very many of those situations, but there were times I tried, if I'm being completely honest. And, some of the guys I trained with who were they're much more skilled than I was. They would do all sorts of things that would make my stomach sink a little bit. And, the craziest stuff I ever did was just, walking along a ledge on a building where, you didn't want to fall off. I'll just say that. But beyond that, I mean, these guys were doing flips across these ledges or doing like dive vaults or dive kongs, I guess you could say, across them. And well, yeah, you bring up a good point of that being a deficit in some ways, but you actually just reminded me about how balanced things need to be. So I don't want to fearmonger people and say, "Oh yeah, you shouldn't go outside because driving is dangerous."
Right.
I think it's just a risk that you have to accept. And in the other end of the extreme, if you do something like parkour, you are constantly testing that limit all the time. And then you realize I really have to know what I'm doing, or I have to at least feel confident in what I'm doing, or this could end really badly for me. And life is filled with all sorts of examples of discomfort, whether that be in school, relationships, or work. And parkour is great for artificially inserting yourself into constant discomfort. But you have to gauge how much you're willing to go through, because if you take on too much, then it might be a broken arm or worse.
Right.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't even connect those two dots at first.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, because like at the end of the day, the way I would say you can enter the danger zone is that it does come down to training and being on your P's and Q's, right? Like when you're in those situations for parkour, you're not immediately going and jumping off a building. You work your way up to it. And that's where I was going to say, like, yes, it is dangerous, but if you are doing your due diligence to train for those moments, then the percentage of success goes up, right? And I think that's the same for even like driving. The longer you've been driving, the more it's second nature. Yes. The more experience
Absolutely.
you have. Like, there's been many a time where, not many a time, but it's been a few times where like there's a car accident that happened. I witnessed right in front of me, and I just kept driving and like did the whole, the whole moving maneuvers. But it was like, my brain went, okay, it's time. Cool, calm, collected. We're going to get out of this, and we're going to make it happen. Versus, I know some people may not have that mindset when it comes to certain things, but that's one of the things that I have that mindset of. Like, if there comes a push to shove moment, I don't have the doubt that I won't persist through. And sometimes that people call that like ego, but I call that in a sense like manifesting the future of I'm visualizing the thing and doing the thing. And that's very powerful in itself. Now, granted, I don't think with the distracted driving that they're visualizing that they're getting out of it. I'm not sure. But it's, I guess by that logic and my argument is if they have practice, then it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're encouraging anyone to drive distracted, but I understand what you're getting at, and going to your point about, I guess, manifesting what you're looking for, or feeling confident in what you're going to do or planning to do. I think that comes sometimes you have no control over whether or not you experience the things that prepare you for that. Like, I won't spend too much time talking about it, but Brazil, I didn't anticipate being a really difficult experience. And just for context or anyone who's listening, so I went to Brazil a few years back to work on my first movie. And I was excited because it was my first movie, but it ended up being a total disaster for a plethora of reasons. And the disaster aspect of it was a major teaching moment. In fact, I'd argue that it was I don't know the exact term for it, but there's a concept in not literacy, but in literary works where a young person comes of age, they go through a singular intense experience that changes them into the next stage of their life. And that was without a doubt my experience in Brazil. Granted, I wasn't a kid. I wasn't like 18 or 19. I was 23 at the time, but that still was that sort of transformative experience. And I didn't plan for that. I was just open to things happening to me, like opportunities coming up. And even if I didn't feel comfortable with them following through until, I was put into the situation. And some people just they want to get there so badly, but you don't really get to choose it necessarily. Sometimes it never happens to people. Like if you live in a isolated state enough, you could just be a child your whole life. I mean, it depends on your circumstances. Like if you have family that's willing to just take care of you all the time, then sure. But, you could easily hide from all of the responsibilities or the discomforts of life. I mean, they'll catch up to you eventually. Like we all go to the same place one day, which is pretty uncomfortable, I think, for most people to think about. But you could spend the majority of it not really worrying about things if you're in the right context.
100%. I think what you were talking about was the coming of age story, in a sense. Like, I think of many of books. Like, first book that comes to mind of like a coming of age story is a book that we both read in high school, The Alchemist. I do not remember the author, but that is a great book.
I didn't actually read that.
What? Wait,
yeah,
did you Spark Notes it?
No, I don't know anything about The Alchemist. Wait. I'm thinking of Full Metal Alchemist. I'm sorry.
You were thinking the anime.
Wait, The Alchemist. I don't think we had the same reading material.
Wait, you took AP stuff. That's why.
I took it advanced sophomore year and then AP whatever, like junior or senior year.
I don't know what year we read it. So, just so that everyone knows, The Alchemist is by Paulo Coelho, Portuguese guy. And the story follows the shepherd boy Santiago in his journey across North Africa to the Egyptian pyramids after he dreams of finding a treasure there. And the book is basically supporting the idea of it's not about the goal, it's about the journey. So I will just spoil the plot for the sake of the audience and kind of bringing it full circle back to Rome's concept, is that Santiago goes through and is tasked with finding this treasure to help his village, and is told that he has to go on this big journey to do so. Goes on said big journey, and then comes to find out at the end that the treasure is in his village. And so it brings into mind what is lots of different things, but like, home is where the heart is. You could throw that in there. But for me, it's finding what you're looking for. Sometimes you have to go on this big journey to do so. And so to get back at Rome's story about going and producing a film in Brazil, is maybe that was your journey to then come back home and do this podcast with your buddy from high school.
Yeah, and actually be organized enough to show up at the same time every morning and do it. Granted, I was a little late this morning, so I apologize.
We were both running a little late. I had a little too much fun last night, but it's all good. That's why I was like, I need caffeine and I need
some extra time.
greasy food. I'll let you devise from your own conclusions what we did last night.
Yeah. Dude, greasy food, man. Sometimes that is just as someone who always strives to eat as healthy as possible and like make good decisions for myself, ain't nothing like two McDoubles from McDonald's. I'll tell you that.
Oh God, I remember that argument we got into where it's like the most authentic American food was McDonald's.
It is.
God, I don't want to walk into that again because we're at two different spots. You always say McDonald's. I always say the best fast food burger in America is In-N-Out Burger. Some people will fight me for that, and some people will fight you for that. But
that's too all natural. It's not produced enough.
Give me that.
Think about Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about all of the world consumes media that comes out of one small town. Like, LA, this area is a pretty powerful, influential place when you think about it. And the result, the product they deliver is completely fabricated. And people love it. So in the same way that movies are all just made up, and those burgers are all just made up, and they're not real ingredients, and that's what makes them true, authentic American cuisine.
Oh my God.
Life imitates art, art imitates
life.
I don't know which one it is, but the burger is fake, therefore making it authentic in the vein of what we're discussing.
That's funny.
Anyways, I'm going to get off that tirade.
We could spend a whole hour debating like what is the truest American food. That'd be a funny one for our podcast. Truest.
Well, could we agree that it's some form of burger? I mean, I don't know what's more American than burgers, unless they didn't originate here. I don't really know.
The hamburger comes from Hamburg, Germany.
Does it actually?
Yes, it does.
Okay, we need to phase that out then.
We need to phase up. Well, like, I think it's one of those things where it's real dependent on, like, how do I put this? The world is kind of like a salad / melting pot. Depends on how much dressing you're putting on. But at the end of the day, food is like fusions of what's available in the area and what influences are coming about, right? So to me, it makes sense in America why burgers are big because of the cattle industry and how big the cattle industry was and is in America, where you could get beef for in an affordable price versus elsewhere in the world. It's like, do I want to kill the thing that produces me milk? Probably not. So, and that's where in America, you just had a plentiful amount of access to steers in a sense where that's the whole vibe was you'd take your steers up to Chicago, they get slaughtered, and via Chicago through its railway system would distribute beef throughout America in a sense. So that's where I would say burgers could be argued as American. I think the world thinks of burgers as like the most American food. I don't think they think of Germany.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I didn't even connect the dots between Hamburg and hamburger, so it seems pretty obvious too.
Well, it's like a sandwich, right? Where's a sandwich from?
Who knows?
It's from the Earl sandwich. From England, actually.
The Earl sandwich?
The Earl of Sandwich. And you're like...
So Sandwich is a town?
No, it's a name of a noble.
Well, I understand that. So the Earl is the noble, but is that illustrating of his town or is his last name? Where is the sandwich coming from?
The sandwich part, I am unsure of that. I'm trying to do a little bit of a read real quick.
Because I was assume if you say it word like the Earl of Oxbay, that means that the noble is from Oxbay. So I imagine Sandwich is probably the location,
I'm trying to find.
which makes it even
Earl
more
Sandwich.
hilarious because the cuisine I've had while I've been in the UK has not the best.
Really?
Ironically, the best food I've had in the UK
Was McDonald's?
was well, that was number 2. Number 1 was the cafeteria chicken. Oh my god, I could eat that stuff the entire day, and everyone else was complaining. The locals, the foreign exchange students, they're like, "This stuff is awful." And I said, "Okay, well, more for me then. Sign me up. I'll have that." It was like a drumstick, and I would just order that every day I went to the cafeteria. But also, you go through this weird experience when you're living away from home where you don't know when your next meal is going to be, so you just start eating. I have a crazy story about eating an entire pizza, but we can save that for another time.
So it is because of John Montague, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, and it is commonly said that the Lord of Sandwich, during long sessions of cribbage and other card games at public gambling houses, would order his valet to bring him roast beef between 2 pieces of toasted bread.
Oh, so that was just like something he
just did on
enjoyed doing that was out of the ordinary.
Yes. Now, granted, that is not like the first historical sandwich-like food. Like you have, I'm reading this straight off.
You have pita bread and things like that.
You have in the 1st century BCE, before the Common Era, the ancient Jewish sage Hillel the Elder said to have wrapped meat from paschal lamb in bitter herbs in soft matzah, flat unleavened bread during Passover in the manner of modern wrap made with flatbread. So, I think this was the first time it was like toast, but flatbread and wraps, like that's been happening for a long time. It's like everyone has like a dumpling of some sort, right? Where it's like some sort of pocket and some delicious food or filling inside. Like I'm thinking of straight up dumplings, pierogies.
Are tacos sandwiches?
That's a good question.
That long pause.
Well, I had to really think about it for a second. I would say it's like more of a wrap.
For sure.
Even like a burrito would be a wrap, because like a sandwich to me it's
bread.
It is bread, but bread that is like you could make. I would make an argument that a quesadilla is more of a sandwich than a taco.
Yeah. Well, I guess based on its orientation of the bread being vertically displaced, sure.
Now because I'm like trying to think, because I was like, what is the highest form of a sandwich is what we're discussing.
The highest form of a sandwich
is a.
Are we starting the doctrine for some kind of sandwich cult?
the cult of sandwich. Is it a sandwich?
Yeah.
What? So in order to have like a sandwich hall of fame, we have to have these parameters. So tacos.
The cult of New Delhi, spelled Deli.
Oh, I'm reading more. This is interesting. It's already been decided for us. So in the United States, a court in Boston, Massachusetts ruled in 2006 that a sandwich includes at least 2 slices of bread. And under the definition, this court finds the term sandwich is not commonly understood to include burritos, tacos, quesadillas, which are typically made with a single tortilla stuffed with filling of meat, rice, and beans. The issue stemmed from the question whether a restaurant sold burritos could move into a shopping center where another restaurant had a no-compete clause in its lease prohibiting other sandwich shops. Interesting. I'm going to continue reading. Also in the U.S., a court in Indiana ruled in 2004 that tacos and burritos are sandwiches, and Specifically, the court agrees with Quintina that tacos and burritos are a Mexican-style sandwich. The court further ruled that the definition would also apply to a restaurant that serves made-to-order Greek gyros, Indian naan wraps, Vietnamese banh mi's, and the New York State has a definition that explicitly includes burritos, gyros, hot dogs, wraps, and pita sandwiches. Very interesting.
What I'd like to know is, why did any of this need to go to court to be categorized?
So it came back to the one in Boston was because there was a no-compete clause for a lease. So I'm assuming maybe there was like a Subway. And Subway was like, hey, if we're going to move in here, there can't be another sandwich shop in the food court per the lease. And so, say a taqueria wanted to move in, and Subway was like, no, that's a sandwich.
Oh, so they add those as categories. Wait, it's a no-compete clause. So that is allowing yourself to monopolize an area?
In contract law, non-compete clause, often an NCC restrictive covenant or covenant to not compete. It's a clause under which party, usually employees, agrees not to enter into or start a similar profession in trade or competition against another party. So in a sense, yes, like you are buying the market of the food court for sandwiches, or you're cornering the market.
It's kind of like how internet providers work.
Yeah, we have a problem with that in Rochester, New York. For a while, it used to be Frontier, and then Frontier just declined. I don't know if they exist anymore even. I think they kind of do, but I think they're like...
Frontier is fairly popular over here.
Really? In Rochester, New York, they just went... And then Time Warner had a monopoly. Like the only internet provider you could get from like Syracuse to Buffalo, basically the whole top half of New York, was Time Warner Cable, and they actually had a lawsuit because they weren't doing what they said they were doing in terms of building more infrastructure for it, increasing speeds, things of that sort. And so there's this I don't know what you would describe him as, besides like, I'm not any insult to the man, but there's this gentleman named Thomas Golisano who's kind of like a big money person who then invested into another company called Greenlight, where basically, sorry,
Greenlight?
Got distracted by a phone call. And that's what you were starting to hear,
good.
the Zorro. So we were starting to hear One Piece in the back. Decided to invest in Greenlight, which was fiber optics, and that's been the biggest competitor in Rochester against Time Warner Cable or any other internet service. And it's...
Well, that's good, right? To have another competitor.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I think what's funny to me about capitalism is that in a perfect world, you would have competition and then breed things. But what also capitalism does is, because it's not pure capitalism, is they'll set up regulations so you don't compete and so that you own the market. And that to me is just greed. It means to me like,
right.
Oh, I guess your stuff wasn't that great and you were scared. That actually happened in terms of another local grocery store called Wegmans. So Wegmans is a really big grocer, and there is a huge following for it. It is kind of like people who love Apple products. Like, there are people in Rochester and good part of New York in general who are like, Wegmans is Wegmans. And so Wegmans is famous because they were the first grocery store to do hot food, like a bar. So in the West Coast, we experienced that with another grocer called Whole Foods before they got purchased.
Oh,
before
okay.
they
yeah,
before they got purchased up by Amazon. So fast forward. So Wegmans is headquartered in Rochester, New York. Their flagship store where they do all their experimenting is down in Pittsford, New York, a very affluent area. And Whole Foods wanted to get into their market in that area specifically. And so what Wegmans did was held up the building process of the Whole Foods because they complained that traffic would be increased along Monroe Avenue, which I found, again, very interesting because, again, why are you doing this? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I remember when I was in California, the hot food pricing for Whole Foods was like about $1 or $2 cheaper than the Wegmans. And that was like California pricing versus Rochester, which says something to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, too, is with Whole Foods, you do get a discount if you have Amazon for certain products. If you have Amazon Prime. So for 2 to 3 years, they held them up in litigation of zoning stuff, and then they finally broke through. But it was just humorous to me because the street that they were complaining about already had heavy traffic. It just is one of the few main roads in Rochester. Like, every town has like 4 main roads that are just always packed. That is one of them. And so it is going back to like the not compete with the sandwich part for what the definition of a sandwich is. Like, businesses will use whatever it takes to stay on top, period. And ideally what we get taught in capitalism is like it should be through competition and through sales and the quality of your product, but it simply isn't that thing. And that's where I think as a society, that's where we should go towards, but that's another discussion for today. I'm still on the fact of there was court cases to determine what a sandwich was.
What was considered a sandwich? Yeah,
So,
I know.
According to that, by definition, a taco would be a sandwich. So it gets into this.
And also a tomato is a fruit, to my understanding, right?
Tomato is a fruit. Yes. So I think
I refuse to accept this.
I refuse to accept that the world is round.
Purely on the basis that a tomato is not fruit-like enough to me.
Is it because of the flavor?
Yes.
Interesting.
And the look.
So are all fruits sweet?
They should be. They better be. Or they better have a little bit of tart or tanginess mixed with the sweet.
Are tomatoes tart?
No. I don't know how to describe a tomato. It's like, how do you describe soup?
Soup is
savory?
I would say savory. You can have sweet soups too, but I would say it depends on the soup. And the reason why I'm asking those questions the way I'm asking is I'm trying to get at the fact that fruit can have whatever flavor. It is not dependent on flavor per se. It is dependent on the composition of what the definition is. Vegetables and fruits have seeds in the thing. And so technically zucchini and cucumbers I believe are fruit too.
All right, this podcast is over. I don't want to have any more of this sacrilegious talk. I've also heard that strawberries are technically not fruit, right? They're berries, which is a distinction.
Let me see. Are berries fruit? Let's see what the
because
the internet tells us the truth.
If you're saying that tomatoes are fruit and strawberries aren't, then those terms have lost all meaning to me, because I think a fruit should look and taste like the word that's being used to describe it, and vice versa with vegetables. But no, it's not how it works, apparently. Oh, actually, a question. Are you a fan of avocado?
I like avocado, but I don't like avocado toast. I think avocado toast is sacrilegious and just straight up disrespectful. Like, how are you about to charge me $16? I get it. Avocados are expensive. They're usually like $2 to $3 a pop. But how are you going to charge me $16 for avocado spread, which is you taking said avocado, dicing it up, and hitting it with mortar and pestle, ideally, but probably not, and you're scraping it on this bread for me? Like, by that logic, PB&J should be the same cost.
You're paying for that alchemical process.
You're paying for that. What chemical process? The spread?
Alchemical, the mortar and pestle, the effort that it works. Listen, Obi-Wan, what do you use to shave? Do you like what kind of
I
razor
use an
do you
electric
use?
razor because I can't grow facial hair.
My example is lost on me. If one day you ever decide, you ever get curious, and you're like, I want to try, well, I guess I should ask, what kind of shaving cream do you use?
This is even more funny because I don't use.
You don't
shaving
use
cream
any
because I use an electric razor.
Right.
Now, when I did use
Right.
to shave, the reason why I also switched to electric razor because I used to get bumps and my skin would break out very easily because I'm a little sensitive boy, and
Yeah.
I needed the
relate.
sensitive skin stuff. So I actually used products for like sensitive skin. I used to do like the Barbacil stuff, and that just like it was like you used to give context. We went to all boys Catholic school where you had to be clean shaven. If you were not clean shaven, you were given a Bic razor, plastic.
Wait, you were given a razor? That never happened to me.
Oh, me, no. I just remember our mutual friend Austin would have to do that often because the man
They gave him a razor
to use and to shave off his beard or
What?
in the middle of school day.
I did not know that was a thing.
You didn't know that was a thing?
I mean, I know we were getting written up for having facial hair, but I didn't know they supplied the the shaving products on the spot.
It's kind of like when you are at a hotel and like, oh, I forgot my razor, and they give you like this like plastic bag full of like mass bought clearance Costco thing. Like,
Hey, I like my clearance products. I'll have you know.
I like my Bic razors that are like after 2 uses, gotta throw this bad boy away, or else we're like ended up with all the toilet paper and paper towel like blotched up like scab pads in a sense or bandages.
Well, that actually, you just reminded me of something else that's kind of interesting. But before I get distracted by that, so you use the Barbasol, right? You're familiar with the can, but have you used any other format of, what would you call it? Cream or lather?
Cream or lather? Oh, I usually would use cream, shaving cream.
It dispenses immediately, right?
It's in a bottle, kind
As
of
soon
like
as
what's it called? I don't know, just like a regular squeeze bottle.
Yeah, like it comes out of a can.
Oh,
or something.
mine never came out of a can.
Or
Because that's the one. Those
okay,
are the
so
ones that made my skin go, "Hello,
okay,
pimple time."
right? Yeah.
And then you're like, I can't shave for the next like week, and then it's just this awkward. It's not a good time.
But you've never used like the ones where you have to stick the brush in and like wet it slightly, and then you have a little bowl and you got to spend like 30 to 40 seconds vigorously like swirling in this bowl to generate any lather.
Interesting. No. Do go on for the
So
description.
that is what you pay for when you order avocado toast. That effort. So this whole conversation was literally just to make that one point.
To make the one point.
Using shaving because I thought it was something you might have used before.
That's hilarious. It turned into like, I don't do this because I can't grow facial hair, man. Like, it takes me a week to grow out any sort of stubble, and then it's like I'm a pubescent boy who just like entered puberty. It's pretty pathetic.
Wow.
But
I mean, that's not. I mean, everyone's genes are different. It's not something you have any control over.
And that way we will always look 23. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can look at it. I mean, I don't enjoy having like a 5 o'clock shadow necessarily by the next day. Some people get it the same day, which is insane.
That's wild.
I like to shave once or twice a week, but even at that rate, I look like a werewolf at that point. My face.
You got the good genes.
I suppose if your goal is to have variety or like choose your look whenever you want, then yeah, that's good for me, I guess. But it's also more work because I typically enjoy being clean shaven.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen you with a full beard.
I grew it out for
the Rona.
I think it was three or 4 months during the Corona, and that was it.
The Corona Light,
actually,
or the Corona full Corona Extra.
The Corona Extra. Yeah, and that was around the time that I went through my breakup. In fact, I think I hadn't shaved for 3 or 4 days since the last time I saw her, and so I was like, oh, I got to keep this beard. It has symbolic meaning.
This is my symbol of defiance.
Yeah. This is my, like, you know how in movies they change the look of the main character to be all kind of grizzled and tough looking. I was in that like episode 2 arc of the film series.
Oh my God.
Where the character changes.
It's funny. I think everyone who normally didn't grow facial hair grew facial hair in the pandemic, because that's what I did too. I had a mustache. God, it was.
Oh yeah.
Couple things in play. The amount of times people would tease me about looking like an 80s porn star or like offer me cocaine because of the mustache. I was like, I don't know. No. And so I immediately just shaved it off. I only had one woman who was like, "Oh, I like this." And I'm like, "You do?" And then it made me like,
it's almost more off-putting.
Exactly, more off-putting, because I'm like, wait a minute here.
What's up with your taste?
What's up with your taste?
Why do you like
why
this?
do you like this? Like, are you at home watching 80s porn and like this is nostalgic for you? Like,
okay.
Actually, what's hilarious is, or the irony of it all was, I ended up getting with a lovely gal at the time, and I was like, she was fine with it. And then immediately after I shaved off, she's like, "Oh, thank God." I was wondering how long that was going to last. And I was like, this is when we advocate for ourselves and let us know if this is a good thing or not. Granted, I was wearing a mask all the time outside anyway, because, excuse me, the nature of the work I was doing. I was working at Valvoline, and I didn't want. It was just easier to have the mask on because of like fumes from like cars.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to worry about oil splatting on my face when I was working real quick. So it was like a convenience thing for me. But that's when I first grew it out, and I was like, "Oh, this is not good." Will I ever do it again? Maybe at 40 to enter that new era or in that new decade. Right. But I'm not. No, not in the 30s. I'm not doing it. I just also feel like I touch my face more if there's stubble. And so I don't want to touch my face, so I'll shave. So I'm not.
I'm touching my face right now because you said that.
Is this like the yawn thing where it's like, oh, how many people did I make yawn?
Right. I'm trying to hold it back right now.
Give in to your anger.
I think, people have expressed differing opinions about my facial hair to me. Like, some are like, "Oh yeah, well, very few actually say clean shaven looks better. I usually hear, "Oh, you should grow your beard. You should grow your beard," which I just don't. After having grown it out for several months, I don't like it at all because one, it's more maintenance, and two, it's just the skin underneath is like, I already have issues with my skin, with seborrheic dermatitis and, redness, inflammation, and things like that. And just having the hair and the itchiness introduces a whole new factor I don't want to deal with. So my goal usually is, I watched this video that was, what is the most attractive facial hair look for men? And sort of the universally agreed upon, and I used universal loosely because everyone obviously has different opinions, but I guess on average, it was the clean shaven, but 2 days after look.
So 5 o'clock shadow.
Your face, is 5 o'clock shadow. Your face is starting to get a little darker and you could see the stubble coming in, but it's not whiskers, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So to pick up whoever we're aspiring to pick up is to have that 5 o'clock shadow look as your advice. So shave.
When in doubt.
So when we're about to go on a date, I have to plan out in the sense of like, we shaved the 2 days before and then go
2 days before.
2 days before. And then I just have to look good, smell decent, wear maybe a collared shirt of my choice, some nicer shoes, and we're good.
I have definitely gone to the point where I sort of try to characterize my outfit based on if I'm wearing glasses that day or if I have facial hair.
Interesting.
Maybe it's like something a little more rugged looking with the beard or with the stubble. But personally, I prefer just being clean shaven. But when I'm not really sure, I just do the 2 days before rule, and usually I get away with it.
And I could have gotten away with it except for your dog and your kids. Some Scooby.
By the way, but quick reference to Scooby-Doo. If anyone wants to watch Scooby-Doo on TV, make sure you watch on Tubi. That's not a paid sponsorship. I downloaded it the other day and it's been fantastic for Scooby-Doo specifically.
It's Tubi. What? Who's Tubi?
It's just an app, so you can watch free live TV. They have movies on there too. So if anyone has a smart TV and is on a budget, like you don't want to pay for Netflix or Apple TV, then it's on the App Store. You just get Tubi, Tubi.
To be or not to be? That is the question. I had to do that dad joke.
To be, to be or not to be wrapped up with this episode, because we're an hour and 17 minutes in, which I don't think that's a record necessarily, but it means that I think we're getting more confident just hanging out and chatting, which that's
yes good. And like we said to our listeners before, you are seeing a commitment unfold for what you do. We do this at least an hour, 2 hours every weekend now. And this is episode, I think, 6?
This is 6.
Numero 6. And so we touched on a lot of different things today. We talked about AI, got some good things talking about that. We didn't talk about the punching up, punching down in terms of comedy. That could be another episode because we kind of got distracted.
Oh, yeah, that could be its whole thing. I feel like Jesse would be great to have for that one.
Yes, I think he'd be a good guest for it. The distracted driving basically took up most of our time. Do not drive distractedly. The world is your oyster. There is enough simulation out there, guys, for it. Death is always on the line, so don't do it. And
good baseline.
Then we talked about what is a sandwich. I think that took up most of our time. And I think for the next episode, what I'd like to do is possibly talk about like history of social media, but we'll see how that goes. This is Obee Won signing off, and I'll let Rome do his own outro.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. We appreciate any feedback. I'm not quite sure. we're actually recording this before our platforms have been settled, but wherever that may be, feel free to chime in if anything stands out to you or is interesting. Obviously, we'd love to hear from you and hope it serves you at the end of the day. So I'm Rome with Obee Won signing off. We'll see you in the next one.